In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how we can take the ship that we built and we can assign some different materials to it. So let's go ahead and get started on this. So let's just go ahead and select the ship, and you can see some of the different pieces that we have. I've got this in a group that's within here. Actually, there is just the object called ship, and there's a group called boosters that's in here like this, and we've got these individual boosters. So let's go ahead and assign a material to just the body of this. To do this, we're going to go up to Windows, and we're going to go to Rendering Editors and go to the Hypershade. Go ahead and open that up. And you can see that this is Maya's tool for where we can create different materials and things like that. So what you probably want to concern yourself with is maybe not so much Arnold, but just Maya, because we're going to be looking at some just very basic stuff. There are different materials within here that you can use. A Lambert material is going to be something that's very matte. So if we just middle mouse drag that onto the object, you can see that right now, if we take a look at this ship that we've got here, sorry, got about the blue line right there, that the specular component of this, the highlight, is pretty much non-existent for that type of material. Now, a material that I like is if we use this blend material, and let's go ahead and use that. I'm going to try to see if I just can dock this in some kind of way, if that blue line will go away, and then maybe just pull that back out. Okay, so that did. And so with the blend material, I'm going to take this blend and middle mouse drag it and select it on here. So now as we roll around, you can see that there's quite a bit of specular on that material. If you double click on the material itself, it's going to bring up maybe the attribute editor for this. They've put everything together in the Hypershade, so like if I pull this off to the side, you kind of have all these options that you see here right down in this area, but they kind of limit it just a little bit. So you know, I always like to actually just maybe double click this and open this and get to all the different options that are on there. I'm going to pull this down here so we can see this a little bit better and through here. So obviously with the color, you can change the color. If you click on here, you can change it to a color that you want to make it. If you want to desaturate this stuff, you can kind of pull over and through here, and that's going to do light and dark. And if you do the wheel and kind of push and pull around here, you can choose the different colors that you want to kind of choose from through that. So the other thing is this specular color. So if we pull this down, you can see that we're going to either make it less intense or more intense. The eccentricity is going to be how broad that specular highlight is, and then we've also got a fall off component, or specular roll off. And with those three, you can kind of create what kind of material that you're looking for. So like something that's more, let's say like glass or something like that, would have a pretty tight specular component to it, and it would be very bright at the same time. So this is more like glass or something like that, or hard plastic. Now if you pull it up and through here, then you can see it is more like maybe a softer plastic or something to that effect. So just playing with some of those controls will give you some of that right there. We can also name this, and we can call this ship body like this, and maybe you want to do blend at the end of it. That's up to you what you want to name these things. So there's a possibility for that. You can also take objects and you can right click on them and say assign material to selection. So what we could do is this. Let's go ahead and select some faces that are in here for the windshield, and we'll make a new material. We'll go ahead and go to Maya, and we'll go to blend, and we'll go to windshield, blend like this, and we'll make it a bluish kind of color like that, and we'll pull up the specular on it and pull this down a little bit. So I think that might be pretty good to work with. Let's go ahead and select the faces, so we can right click on here and say face, or we can hit F11, whatever you want to do. I have symmetry turned on, and if you remember symmetry, if we double click the options for this, we can turn symmetry on right in through here, just in case you want to do that. So I'm going to put it on the pick tool, and I'm just going to hold down shift and select these different faces that we've got here like that, and I'm going to tap 4 to see the wireframe. I want to see through this and make sure I didn't select any faces on the backside. So to see this shaded, just tap 5 like that, And then what we're going to do is just right click over this windshield material and say assign material to selection. So now you can see that those faces have their own material assigned to them, just like that. So it's going to have its own color and specular component and everything else like that. So what we can do is now we could take these boosters. This might work a little bit different if you have this in a group. So you might have to select these individually like this. So just be a little bit careful about how you select these. We've got those selected. Another way to assign materials, if you right click over this and you go to assign new material, and that'll make a new material, or you can say assign existing material. So we're going to go ahead and select this ship body blend just like that, and we'll assign those so they have the same material as the ship. Now let's create some material that will be like the emissive kind of boost that's on here. So let's go to Windows, Rendering Editors, and Hypershade, and let's open that back up. And let's go ahead, and this time we can either make a surface material or a surface shader, and if we do that, that'll be just a material that just has color information, and sometimes that comes in handy if you want to make something that's off in the distance or the background and you only want color, you don't want it to have any kind of shading. That's a possibility. Or we could use the Lambert material and make one of those. We've already made one Lambert material because I selected one of these before, so I'll just double click on that Lambert material. I'll call this booster booster Lambert, like that, something like that. I'll make it kind of a reddish, maybe orange kind of color like this and through here. And I think that'll be pretty good. Actually, I'll take the incandescence and I'll pull that up and maybe make that like kind of red a little bit. So incandescence makes it have the appearance that even if there's no light on it, that it kind of is glowing a little bit. So what I can do is we can go to these pieces here. I can hit F9 or right click on here and say vertex. And if you remember from the earlier videos, we showed how to take this vertex and convert it into a selection of faces. If you hold down Control and add the modifier F11, F11 is faces, but when you hold down Control, you can change one selection type into another. So Control F11, and then we've got this selected here, and now we can right click on this and say assign material to selection. And let's go ahead and do that same process for there. We'll right click on here, say vertex, select it, hit Control F11, and then we'll right click on here and say assign material to selection. We'll do this again, hit F9, Control F11, and then right click on here and say assign material to selection. Now once we have this on here, it's possible that we can always go back to these materials, we can double click on them, and we can start to change some of the values that you see within here. So if you wanted to make this a more of a yellowish kind of color or something to that effect, it's possible to go ahead and do that. So that's a quick and kind of easy way for us to do some material selections on here. The next thing I want to show you is adding some lighting. So we can do that kind of quickly and maybe add some lights and put some shadows on here. To show some shadows, we need a ground plane or something to work with. So we're going to go to create polygon primitives, and we're going to do, let's just do a plane. So let's find the plane, create that. I'm going to tap W, E, and then R. Remember, W is move, E is rotate, and R is scale. So I can just take this and I can scale this up, and we're going to make a floor for us. So it would probably make sense if I just made this 100, kind of like that. And I'm going to take this and tap W and move it down. Now you might see some screen space ambient occlusion. That's because I have this turned on in the viewport right here, and I also have anti-aliasing turned on. So you might want to have those options. I think it makes things look a little bit better. Okay, so if I tap 7, that shows us what the world looks like with the lighting. Currently, the reason it turns everything black is because there is no lighting. Now you can use this to your advantage. I'll just hit Control H real quick on that. You can use this to your advantage if you want to evaluate silhouettes. So if you want to do that, you could take all your lights and kind of hide them. You can see back here we have some of that luminance turned on, so that's why even with no lighting it feels like there's some lights coming out of the back of that. So I'll do 6, and that'll turn on our texture mode, or 5 or 6, either one of those. And let's go ahead and bring the floor back. I'm going to name this floor like this, and I'll hit Shift H on it, and I'll bring everything back. And then let's go ahead and create a light. So if we go to create and we go to lights and then we go to spotlight and do option box, we can go ahead and create a light. Now I do know that I want this to be a shadow casting light, so I'm going to tell it to cast shadows. And I'm going to talk to you about this cone angle and prenumial angle in just a second, but I'm going to set this to 40 and 20 like that and hit apply. And now it is possible that you can take the spotlight and you can move it out and you can rotate the thing and kind of get it into position. Now if I tap 7, you can see what it looks like with the actual lighting. One way that I like to look at lights is if you middle mouse drag it into the viewport, you can actually look through the light. And so now as you rotate around, you're actually looking through the light and seeing what's going on here. So to go back, we're just going to go to panels, perspective, and then go to perspective like this. I'm going to select the light and hit Control A just like this, and we're going to slide this thing over, and we've got our cone angle, which is set to 40. If we drag it down, it gets smaller like this. And if we do the prenumial angle, if it's set to 0, it's going to be a nice tight line on here, right? Now if we drag this out and make it larger, that increases the fall off for the light. So you can see a value of 30, what it does, 20. So it just makes it that transition a bit softer. So I'm going to put it on something like 30, like this. Now this light, you can see it's only going from this one direction like this, and we don't have any other lights in the scene. So in the real world, usually when a light hits the floor or something like that, it bounces. We don't have anything like that going on in the viewport right now, so we have to kind of simulate bounce light if we want. So we would have to go to create lights and then go to a point light like this and then move it over here like that, and maybe push it down a little bit, push it over here. So if I hit Control A for this, that'll bring up the attribute editor. That's under Windows General Attribute Editor if you want to get to that. And then we can see that this light has no decay for fall off for it. But if that means it'll go, the light will be infinite and go forever. If we put it on something like quadratic, it has a much faster kind of fall off rate. So depending on where the light is, it'll fall off pretty quickly. Now, when you set this, you're going to have to put it on a value that's a bit higher, so like something like this. Also, I forgot to tell you about this spotlight here. We did tell it to have a shadow on there, but there's no shadow on the floor. So we need to come up here to our viewport controls right in here, and we need to go to lighting, and we need to say turn on shadows. Okay, so now we got this light here, and it's giving us a little bit of bounce. If I want to duplicate it, I hit Control D, and I can move this over and through here like this. And then we've got our spotlight. Let's go to shadows. Let's go to resolution, and we'll do 2048 for the resolution, and you can see it gets a little bit better. And then this filter size, if we drag this to the right and do a filter size of 5, we can get this thing to look nice and kind of soft here. Now shadow color, if we drag this over to the right, you can see that we can make the shadow color look a little less intense. So it's really up to you how you want this thing to look, just like that. And then the last thing I'm going to do is within here, within these viewport controls, if we go to show, we could do none and it'll turn everything off. And if we do show and just polygons, we could do that. Now what I was really trying to do, if I put it on all and show everything again, I really didn't want to see the icons for the lights that you see here. So it is possible you can turn individual things on and off. So if we do show and we do lights, we could turn that off. And then now we can kind of see what's going on here with this. Let's select the ship. I'm going to hit Control A. And so when you have an object that has multiple materials and everything assigned to it, you can see it's got the ship body blend, the windshield, and looks like we have to select these to see the material that they've got for this. I'm going to the booster here, and I wanted to do the incandescence. So if we pull this up and we make this kind of like this reddish kind of color, you can see even though it's in the darkness of the light, it'll still have that feeling as if it's kind of self-illuminated. Okay, so I think that's enough for this video. And again, this should help you to understand how to make some simple materials, do a little tweaking of the materials, the colors, the specular components to it too as well, and then do a little simple setup for setting up some lights and getting shadows going on that.